Welcome back to today's episode. Monsieur Spade is an AMC-produced, Clive Owen starring French neo-noir based on the fictional detective from the Maltese Falcon and showrun by the men who created Queen's Gambit and Oz. The drama's pilot runs just over an hour, takes place in 1963, 21 years after the events of the film, and 2 years before Constable Endeavour Morse solves his first case for the Oxford City Police in England. Now, I've got a bit of a game for us to break the ice. I know you've done a lot of research for this show because you read the book.
I read about half the book, and I watched the movie.
You watched the Humphrey Bogart movie. You didn't watch the 1931 movie, which came out and also had the same storyline, but because of the Hays Code, they could never even show the full version of it until like the 60s, so it never got as famous.
From what I read of the book, it seems like the Humphrey Bogart version just follows it. It's almost one for one. They're exactly the same, the way that Sam Spade is portrayed, and it makes sense why they would try and make it into a movie because the film is like 90% dialogue. So it's almost like you're reading a script when you're reading the book.
It has been a while since I saw the film, so can you recap that for me, or the story?
Yeah, so the Maltese Falcon is actually a MacGuffin because it starts off with Sam Spade. He's suave, good at his job, and a cocky private investigator who is given a murder case by the attractive Bridget O'Shaughnessy. But again, that's all just a MacGuffin because a third of the way through the book, it really becomes them trying to figure out where they can find this statue of a falcon that's supposed to be very rare and worth millions of dollars. Then you get introduced to like villains like Casper Gutman, his assistant Cairo, and others, and they're all trying to vie to find this falcon.
And how does it end? Because I don't think that's ruining anything, since this is supposed to take up, the Monsieur Spade show takes up 20-some years after the film.
Yeah, so Bridget O'Shaughnessy, it seemed like she was the reason for the murder. She's brought to jail, so is Casper, and she
goes to jail.
They thought that they found the Maltese Falcon, but it ended up being a fake, but I wasn't really sure, because at the very end of the movie, Humphrey Bogart, he looks at the Falcon, and I wasn't sure if he knew that it was real, or if he was just going to, like, turn it into evidence. I wasn't 100%
and the book would probably tell you, which you weren't able to finish, but you can go back to it.
It's very short, though. I actually enjoyed the book more than the movie because around the time that I saw the movie, which was about a month ago, that was right after seeing Casablanca, which has some of the same actors on the waterfront, Witness for the Prosecution, It's a Wonderful Life, Lawrence of Arabia, The Sting, and Yojimbo. So I do feel like what I would have thought of the film was maybe tainted a little bit because of all the great movies that I just listed.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, well, the archetype those movies presented an archetype for film, but the character Sam Spade presented an archetype for what detectives would later on become in not only film but also every medium, it seems like. Sam Spade, how would you describe him besides, you said suave? You said in this show versus the movie.
Oh, well, it's almost light and day.
Really?
Because he's a lot more reserved in this TV series. Clive Owen, he still has kind of the cockiness to him. There's a couple quips he has, and he doesn't seem to be fazed by anything. That is a lot like the book as well, so I give the show props for that. But it's almost like, remember when you saw the 2020 Perry Mason TV series? It's like comparing that series to the 1957 Perry Mason show.
Yeah.
Because the two of them are completely different. Humphrey Bogart, I don't want to be too mean to Clive Owen.
And Matthew Rhys is nothing like the original Perry Mason.
I feel like Humphrey Bogart was more manly, almost, than Clive Owen was.
Well, I think they are trying to emasculate him. That's what the showrunner said, at least. They were like, hey, let's take this into the future. Let's have him have, a colonoscopy to start off the show?
Yeah,
so
right
it's
after a time jump.
Taking this guy who's supposed to be like this super cool dude and saying, no, you're old now.
He's a lot quieter.
You've been neutered.
He's not as assertive.
But he does still get a nude scene, right? Which is weird.
Yeah.
That's what some people were talking about. It's like he just walks out of the pool naked.
And again, that was nothing like
a 60-year-old man
Spade that
walking
we
out.
got.
Yeah, all right, so let's break the ice. I've got this game. It's called We've Had a Few, and feel free to talk through your answers. There could be more than one or a couple of the answers that just don't fit, but you tell me, all right?
Okay.
Series set in France. We've had a few series set in France. Which of these was not? Irma Vep.
Okay, that was the TV movie,
Lupin.
Right? Yeah. Lupin, it takes place at the Louvre, so yeah, it has to have been in France, right?
The Walking Dead.
The Walking Dead.
Daryl Dixon.
You know, I compared it to that because a lot of this series takes place with a convent, with a lot of nuns and children.
A convent.
Convent, that's what I meant, yeah. And so that I know Walking Dead, Daryl Dixon had the same thing. I'm willing to say yes because I remember there's Claire de la Lune in the trailer.
The song.
So, yes, I think so.
You don't remember when he was passing the zombie store and it was written in French? And then he walked inside.
Yes. And the characters are French. So
and then Departure.
Mm-hmm. The series we did like 3 years ago about the plane?
Yep.
Oh,
was that a French series?
I do not remember.
Okay, well, that was a Canadian series. It was supposed to be a little bit of a twist because you could make the argument.
It's 1955 here in France.
It's 1955 to start the show, but then they jump up to 1963. Yeah,
there's an 8-year time jump, about 20 minutes.
Yeah. But the rest of those, so do you have any choice besides Departure that would have been fake, or is it just Departure?
It would just be Departure for me.
That's correct. All right. We've had a few series starring Clive Owen. First, A Murder at the End of the World. Tell me if any of these are not true.
I think he was in that.
Lisey's Story?
He absolutely was. He was way better in this than Lisey's Story. This show is just way better than Lisey's Story. I think Lisey's Story was my worst of in 2021 or something.
Mm-hmm. He was in No Activity.
He was in No Activity?
What was he in No Activity?
Which one? The U.S. version?
Yes, the U.S. version.
I'm gonna say
he played the bot. Okay.
I was gonna say no.
No, if you're gonna say no, and then Law and Order: Organized Crime.
I'll say yes to that.
Okay. No, I meant the one with where they brought back the character.
Yes, and I'm saying
you're saying he was in that.
Yeah.
Okay. The last two were actually what's his name? Dylan McDermott.
Yeah, because when you said the boss, I was like, that's Dylan McDermott who played him.
Yeah, I was hoping you'd correct me. No, it's weird though because Clive Owen does Dylan McDermott. I can see in TV. He's been in not Haunting of Hill House, but American Horror Stories. Yeah. He's well known for doing both film and TV. But
he can do comedy. I don't see Clive Owen being able to do comedy.
He still feels like a movie actor, but he's been in so many TV shows. I just named a few with A Murder at the End of the World, this show, Lisey's Story, but I've seen him in The Nick, where he played Thackeray, and that was the Steven Soderbergh show.
He got critical acclaim for that role,
but
right?
But when I think about him, I still think of Inside Man and Shoot 'Em Up and Children of Men, the stuff that got him really, really famous. Mm-hmm. But it doesn't help that Dylan McDermott was in a show, I think, a movie called Hostages, right, in 2013?
Yes.
And then 2 years before that, Clive Owen was in a show or a movie, that was the movie, called Intruders, and that came out.
And then there's
Intruders and Hostage, and they both, yeah. So they look a lot alike, is the point I'm trying to make. I'll continue with the game. We've had a few series that do not adapt the original source material as much as use its characters. So, we were talking about this, Captain Laserhawk, a Blood Dragon remix.
Yes, absolutely. I remember that they made that a lot more adult. Or the
Riverdale,
yes, that's the same way. I think the comic was just supposed to be a cheesy high school thing, and then they made it its own TV
Pennyworth.
Series. Yes, absolutely, because that was Bruce Wayne's butler,
Alfred.
Yeah, and that was his backstory as to how he ended up becoming butler.
The showrunners just went wild with that one, and then Lupin.
He was the same though, right?
He was the same character, but if you remember, there were all those little books that...
Yes.
This was a long time ago, so forgive us for not having the right memory on this, but I think you did the research and you said that this was based off a lot of little books.
Yes.
And I think his character has definitely been adapted for more of a modern audience. So you could make the argument that one is... less of the source material, more of just a new story for this guy. So we plop Monsieur Spade into the... Oh, I have one more. Sorry. We've had a few detective series to choose from this month. Criminal Record, Death and Other Details, True Detective, Grimsburg, and Baby Bandito. Which one of those isn't a detective?
Baby Bandito?
Yeah, it's not. That's about a skateboarder, Kevin. When we first went through the list I told you about Baby Banditos, but it was a skateboarder, Kevin, who hatches a plan to steal $7 million, and I think he actually got away with it. I think that's based on a true story.
Oh, okay.
Yeah, but the poster of it is hilarious. All right, yeah, but getting back to the series, let's do the summary here. It's a widowed detective, Sam Spade, so he's been married, and he lost his wife. He's relocated from San Francisco all the way to France, and he's living at this place called the Bazouls.
All the stuff that you were mentioning, I think Bazoul is an actual place in France, like a city.
They filmed at his... I'm going to throw in Clive Owen facts as we're doing this, but they filmed at the rental property that he was in.
Everything you mentioned was after the time jump, because in 1955, Bridget O'Shaughnessy, a main character in one of the best detective novels and films ever made, is dead. by train derailment.
And this is the same Bridget that was played by Mary Astor.
In the movie. And so a more reserved Samuel Spade, P.I., is hired with a Last of Us-like plot because he has to return Teresa, Bridget's daughter, to her father Felipe in France.
Okay.
And then 8-year time jump informs us that Spade's wife Gabrielle is dead. We see them meet even right before the time jump happens. Teresa has an inheritance that she is going to get when she turns 18. Spade has emphysema because he's smoking so much. And some bad men hurt Felipe and murder all nuns at a church.
Oh, well, that happens at the very end, right?
Yes.
Because Forbes said the series premiere ends on a really ghastly, fascinating cliffhanger. What did they mean by that? Besides the fact that there's a bunch of dead bodies.
I think it's because with, as we saw in the Maltese Falcon, Sam Spade, the first scene we see is Bridget O'Shaughnessy coming to him with this murder that he has to figure out what exactly goes on with. And I think that this series is going to be centered around actually him trying to solve this murder.
I meant more along the lines of what made this so fascinating. Like, we see dead bodies on TV every day in every drama that we do. So, like, what made this scene so shocking, and what
because we follow the nuns throughout the whole story.
So you expect them to survive, and then when you see them die, it's like it's just reverting your expectations. And
in fact, the nuns are the people that it brings Teresa to, because in the first 15 minutes of the show, it's probably the first scene is actually the most Sam Spade from the novel that we get from Clive Owen, because he's driving in a car. The score, the music for this, I thought was the best part of the TV series.
And Dever also starts or ends with him driving in a car too.
Yeah,
is it like an old timey like vehicle? And then, like you said, Perry Mason, he's also has an old vehicle.
And he drives to Teresa's grandmother's house, I think the mother of Felipe. And he walks up to the door, knocks on it. She opens up. I think her name is Audrey. And then she realizes what's going on here. Sam Spade is trying to give Teresa to the grandma. And the grandma pulls out a gun. And like I said, Sam Spade, he's not fazed by anything. He's able to disarm her within like 1 second. But it's clear that she is not going to accept Teresa. So that's where I thought that the series was going to go. I thought that was going to be the main plot of the episode, because we're following this for 15 minutes. He's even speaking to a cop. I think the cop's name is Patrice, and Patrice is saying, look, you cannot give Teresa to Felipe because Felipe is this terrible person.
Yeah.
It's better that she grows up fatherless. But Sam Spade, he's like, no, I was given a lot of money to give her to his father, but that actually
give her, yes.
Yes, yeah. And so when they're driving on the road, then their lightning strikes. It hits a branch. The branch ends up crashing into the car. They're not able to go anywhere for that night. And that's when we meet Gabrielle. And it was such a strange time jump because we just met Gabrielle. It's the first scene we get with her where she's going to help bring Sam Spade and Teresa to wherever they're going to go to. It didn't seem like a place where you were cut. Like usually in TV shows you have a score in the background that maybe get louder right as it transitions. But out of nowhere, it's 1963. Teresa is gone. Sam Spade apparently married Gabrielle, but she's dead and she died in 1961 after we only got one scene with her. And it turns out that Felipe, he's back in Beausoul, France, and Sam Spade, he's also really just trying to figure out.
And he lives at like a vineyard, right? Like he's drinking wine and he's no longer a Scotchman or whiskey man.
He's swimming in a pool naked, and he's not even afraid to show his body because a painter comes by saying that he wants to paint
Very
of the
European,
property, and he walks out just completely nude and is drying off with a towel.
That was one of Clive Owen's main things that he put into his contract. No, I'm kidding. No. But his favorite movie, do you want to get, is a Humphrey Bogart movie. Is it Maltese Falcon?
Is it Casablanca?
It's Casablanca.
Yeah.
It is Casablanca. They shot at his rental home, and then he also hates last-minute script rewrites. So I assume that they
kept
the
everything.
showrunners are also the writers and the producers, and they handled all the business of all 6 episodes. So I assume that they gave him the scripts. They're like his neighbor in real life, and then he was able to look at those for a really long time.
Between Queen's Gambit and Oz, this has way more of a Queen's Gambit feel to it. The way that it's shot, like I said, the music, kind of the acting even, because Anya Taylor-Joy, I would say, is as famous now maybe as Clive Owen is.
That's I'm trying to remember. Queen's Gambit obviously took place after these events. It was earlier on, but it wasn't the 60s, was it?
No, but it was decades beforehand. That's also something.
It might have been the 60s. I come to think of it now. Like I'm trying to remember. Oof. All right, keep going.
We also get Jean-Pierre. He's a character who is trying to sell to Spade half of his nightclub. He refers to it as a health club, and he's not a a big fan of his wife, Margaret, because he feels like Margaret is going to get together with Sam Spade, and Sam Spade is somewhat interested in her. So we get a scene where he goes to the club and both of them talk and even flirt with each other later on into the episode.
I like their last name. It's Devereaux, but I've always loved the spelling.
Is it Jean-Pierre Devereaux?
Jean-Pierre Devereaux.
Yeah, because I don't think we get his last name.
And it's Margaret Devereaux as well. So,
we just keep hearing him be called Jean-Pierre throughout the whole show.
You've mentioned Felipe from the first scene, but do we see him in the second half?
There's a phone, we don't see him, but there's a phone call between the two of them where Felipe tells Spade. It was a lot like I was getting flashbacks of Breaking Bad season 4 between Gus and Walter, where Felipe is telling Spade to stay out of just everything that he has to do. He does not want Teresa near Sam Spade.
So you do realize that he is like the villain to Sam Spade.
Not only that, there's a gunshot that rings out
through
over the phone. Yeah, through the phone.
That's so stupid.
So Spade the next day goes to Patrice and is like, I don't know if it was Felipe who was shot, if Felipe shot a gun, what exactly was going on, because
Felipe
I heard
shot himself while he was cleaning the gun.
Well, you hear a fight that broke out between the two of them, and then the gunshot kind of ends the phone call. So Spade can tell that something's going on, and that's where the last episode happens, because Teresa...
The last episode?
Well, it's the last 10 minutes is what I meant. Teresa runs to Spade and is like, look, my dad, he's being hurt by some very bad people. They've come to where all the nuns are and all the kids are. You need to go over there. And that's when Sam Spade decides to drive over there. The kids are being held inside this this room, and they're hiding. And then he walks into this room, and all the nuns are dead.
All right, okay. Well, that seems to have... If you were in a position like this, where something terrible was happening, and you needed a detective between Spade, Sherlock, Endeavor, the Deadlock duo, the Panhandle guy, like, who would be your first choice?
Probably Endeavor, not only because it was my favorite series out of all the shows that you mentioned, but also I mentioned when the season 9, when we did the review for it, it doesn't seem like the villains that they deal with are really that bad.
Oh,
the stunts, like, there's not a lot of bullets that ring out, there's not a lot of action.
So you're saying for safety's sake, even if Endeavor doesn't solve the crime, you feel like in his world, you would be the best off.
Yeah, well, because I feel like with Sam Spade, it's at least going to be... I don't think they're going to go the MacGuffin route. I feel like this full season is going to be about who killed the nuns, and there was also like some questions as to if a motorcyclist was following him around. They say that it was Felipe.
Why did it need to be an hour?
That's the thing. It was way too long for this series. I felt like there was even characters that you could cut. Like Patrice, the officer I mentioned, doesn't really do anything in this show. Gabrielle, why?
Isn't he like serving as his best friend, his number 2?
He's
like
supposed to
like
be,
that?
but we don't see too much of him in the episode.
All of these guys are like French besides Clive Owen. Like they have huge careers over there, but like we don't really know them. But Patrice, we do know because he was in Inglourious Bastards. He's actually, I think in the first scene, I think he's the one who houses the Jews when
is talking to Christoph Waltz.
Christoph Waltz comes in there. Yeah.
Okay, so he does actually, because I didn't even think that his acting was really that good in this. It's just really hard for me though with Clive Owen and Humphrey Bogart to differentiate the two and be like, okay, this is its own type of TV series. Because Humphrey Bogart, I would give the movie like a 7 out of 10. But I feel like he did such a great job in the role where it was hard for me to be like, okay, Clive Owen, he's kind of trying to do a different interpretation, and I have to give the series room for that.
Yeah, look, the critics love Clive Owen, but at the same time, Owen isn't doing a Humphrey Bogart impression, and they all said that. Like, Max Burkholder wasn't doing a Mark Wahlberg impression when we did the Ted series.
Yeah.
Jimmy Simpson clearly didn't do an Ed Harris impression when he was in Westworld. I think you leave the impressions to Daniel Day-Lewis. I think if you're looking like Edward Murrow or whatever, Murrow.
I thought you were talking about Lincoln, Abe Lincoln.
Yeah, exactly. So like he'll embody the characters the way you want, but
I'm still left
just
with
do your own thing.
I'm left with the same question that I did with Ted. Why do this? Because at least with Ted, yes, they recast everyone except Ted. He looks the same, he sounds the same. It's still Seth MacFarlane. Here, why take the Maltese Falcon, which it seems like if you don't do it right, it's going to come off as really pretentious, and try to do this series for it?
I don't know. I don't have it. They're not going to answer that question. Why are you doing this? You think a lot of interviers are going up to
It's just, to me, you have such quintessential characters in the Maltese Falcon.
I actually have an answer now. So this may have to do with like the Mickey Mouse phenomenon again, with the intellectual property. They're coming up on, I think 2026 was a year I thought it was thrown out there, or 2031, where they lose the right to Sam Spade as a character and it becomes public domain.
It would be 2026 because I think it's 75 years or something like that.
I think it depends on the area you're in, so they were giving these two different numbers out there. Some people were already saying it was in the public domain, but that wouldn't make much sense as to why they were pushing the series. But that could be the reason why. Another thing is that I don't want to like dismiss what the creators may have been, Scott Frank and Tom Fontana. They may legitimately have just had this idea and said, we're going to move forward with it, and we think Clive Owen would be perfect for it. Do you give your review, and then I'll go through the other reviews.
I thought that the first 15 minutes were better than the time jump. I thought that when we were following Teresa, because I did care about her
wanted the
character,
whole story to
and Clive Owen
live in 1950.
And it took balls killing off Bridget O'Shaughnessy like right at the start of it, especially by train derailment. It's told through dialogue, and like I said, the first scene is the most Sam Spade from the novel. I was enjoying that, and then I thought that the time jump again was oddly placed, and I thought that afterwards the story kind of plummeted. I didn't really care. It just turned into characters kind of talking to one another. None of them that interesting. A classic plummet. One thing that was nice, there wasn't as many references to the film as you might think. This really was trying to do its own thing. I know that TV shows can get swept up in that, and like you were saying, Clive Owen, he wasn't even really basing his performance off of Humphrey Bogart.
All right, so what's the final tally?
I would give it a 6 out of 10. It was originally going to be a 5 out of 10 because I think that the show tries to even be smarter than it is.
Yes, people have called it like a jigsaw puzzle when they're complimenting it, and then other people are saying it's a muddled plot and confusing when they're not. So you're falling more on the lines of it being confusing and muddled.
Yes, well, the world, I think the big thing is the world in the film. It makes sense why Sam Spade is kind of the center point, because he's very comfortable in his world. But in the TV series, the world is a lot more regular. It's dark and it's violent, and I don't think that his character meshes as well as it did in the series. But again, that's comparing so much to the film that I feel like I have to give it an extra point and give it passing because this is its own story.
Do you think it would have been better if it was in black and white?
I think that would have been a smart decision.
Because they're already doing neo-noir. You're already still in France. It's early enough in the years where, like, I mean, in the 60s they were still doing black and white.
Also,
stuff.
AMC picking it up, especially with the creators of Oz and the Queen's Gambit, two shows that have proven that you really can't make a great TV series. Like, the people behind this have already shown.
Or a successful one, at least.
Yes. So I understand why, I guess, now they made Monsieur Spade when I wasn't too sure before. But I feel like they maybe could have waited a little longer and made something really good.
All right. It has a 7.4 on IMDb. That's not bad. 77% Rotten Tomatoes critic score, 70 on Metacritic. Decider said stream it. The main criticism that I have heard repeated on several places is that does this really need to be Sam Spade, or could it just have been any detective?
No, I meant to say that. That was my biggest problem. Points. That was my biggest problem with the TV series. There really was no need to make it a Sam Spade story.
Okay, so you agree with it?
Yes, you could have changed the characters because Sam Spade, I think, is the only crossover. And aside from maybe Clive Owen's hat that is almost exactly the same as Humphrey Bogart's in the film.
Yeah, it's not a fedora, but it's like something similar. Yeah.
There's really no crossover.
So the AV Club said it was a proudly bilingual series, so I assume you get some French.
In fact, the first thing that Sam Spade, Clive Owen, does is speak French because he's speaking to Teresa's grandma.
I hear it's not the best French, but it is funny how you have a British guy who's playing an American expatriate in France trying to do a French, what he's learned. And the last thing I'll throw in there is the Mercury News said it was rich in period details. So I assume they got the costuming right, that someone put the effort into, the costuming department put the effort into trying to make this look as cool as possible.
There was even a title sequence where you get text. You actually don't see Sam Spade at first. You get text that says something like, Sam Spade is known as the best detective, and that's like, some say Sam Spade is the best known detective in San Francisco. It went on a little longer than most texts do to start off a series, but I did like the intro that
Teresa and him are like teaming up to be like because she's now alone.
Yes,
so and they're going to be this old man teams up with teenage kid sidekick, like I Am the Night or Logan.
Yeah, she's I think 15.
Yeah, she's 15 like I think. But it just feels like that's a trope in and of itself. I think that's where we'll leave it. Thanks for listening. We'll see you on the next episode. Hope you enjoyed this one. Bye.